In this exercise, we're going to create a very basic HTML page using just your operating system's built-in plain text editor, which will be either Notepad for Windows or TextEdit for macOS. This is just to get you over the initial intimidation factor of creating a web page. I'm also going to show you two different ways to look at the source code of a web page in your browser. Let's get started. In Windows, you can open Notepad by going into the Windows search bar at the bottom left and typing Notepad. In macOS, you can find TextEdit in your Applications folder. Once you open TextEdit, you'll need to change a couple of settings in Preferences. Go to TextEdit, Preferences, then select the format here as plain text, and go to the Open and Save settings and check this box for Display HTML files as HTML code. Then in your text editor, type in the following. As you can see, this is an HTML element that's actually named HTML with a start tag and an end tag. The HTML element wraps around all other elements inside an HTML document. The HTML element wraps around all other elements inside an HTML document. Because of this element is also sometimes called the root element. Go ahead and save this file as helloworld.html and save it inside your 1-html-css-javascript folder, which should be inside your NuCamp folder on your desktop. I will just refer to this folder as the course folder from here on out. Make sure that in both Notepad and TextEdit, the file encoding is Unicode UTF-8. Then in Windows File Explorer or macOS Finder, go to that folder. The HTML file that you just made should be there. If you double-click it, it will open in your default browser. If you want to open it in a different browser than your default, then access the context menu by using right-click for Windows or Command+click for macOS and choose Open With. And this is what it looks like in my Chrome browser. As you can see, we only see the Hello World text and not the HTML tags. By the way, it's something of a time-honored tradition in the coding world that whenever you start to learn a new language, you get your feet wet by first learning to display the text Hello World. Let's add a little more to this. Go ahead and bring Notepad or TextEdit back up. Elements can be nested inside other elements. Let's add a H1 element inside the HTML element, enclosing the Hello World text. The H in H1 stands for heading. Go ahead and save this, which you can do with Ctrl+S for Windows or Command+S for macOS. Then go back to the browser. In the browser, you can see that nothing has changed. It won't change on its own. We need to refresh this page. Now you can see that the H1 element has changed the way that the text enclosed in it is presented. The Chrome browser and all modern browsers will parse HTML markup in this way. Let's try something else. Go back to your text editor, then save a copy of this file in the same folder using Save As Hello World.txt. In TextEdit, you go to File, then choose the Duplicate option. then change the file extension from HTML to TXT. All we're doing here is making a copy with a .txt file extension. Otherwise, the content of both files should be the same. If I look in the course folder, I should now see two files, helloworld.html and helloworld.txt. If you're on Windows, there's a good chance you won't see the file extensions because they're hidden by default. If that's true for you, then go up to View and check the box here for file name extensions. And while you're at it, make sure that this box for hidden items is also checked. These are both unchecked by default in Windows, but as a developer, you will want access to this information. Then let's go back to the browser. We can bring up the text file by replacing the .html at the end of this with .txt. Web browsers can display plain text files as well as HTML files, but as you can see, it's showing you the literal text. It's not doing any parsing of the HTML elements because this is not an HTML file. You might be wondering, how is it that we can change an HTML document to a text document simply by changing the file extension? That doesn't work with other file types. You can't change an HTML document to a PDF by just changing the extension to PDF, for example. It's because an HTML document is fundamentally just a text document, and the file extension is what tells browsers to look for the HTML tags inside it and interpret it in a different way. Back in the text editor, go ahead and open the HTML file once again. In Windows, you need to change the drop-down here at the bottom right to say All Files before you can see the HTML file again. I'd like to demonstrate one more thing to you. In the HTML file, replace the end tag for h1 with h2. Technically, this is an error. You should never do this. The start tag and the end tag should match. Let me save this, then back in the browser, I'll refresh the page. And you can see that it's still displaying the same way as before, even with the error. Why is that? What's happening here is that browsers often fix small mistakes in HTML code automatically. Let's look at two ways that we can view the code for a web page in the browser. We can view the actual HTML source code by using right-click or control-click on the web page, then choosing View Page Source. This shows us the HTML source code, and you can see that the error with the closing h2 tag is really there. To see the most current view of the source, however, there's another place we can look. Going back to the browser, then for Windows, hit the F12 button on the keyboard. If you have a laptop with a smaller keyboard, you may need to hit Function F12 if F12 by itself doesn't work for you. For macOS, type the Command, Option, and I keys together. This should bring up a view called the Developer Tools. There's a few different tabs here, but we're interested in the Elements tab in Chrome. In Firefox, this will be called the Inspector tab. And yours may open at the bottom instead of to the right. That's a configuration option you can set, and I just happen to have mine set to open to the right. In any case, what I want you to see is that the closing tag here says h1 and not h2. This is showing us the code after the browser has fixed it. This illustrates that the source code isn't always exactly what gets displayed in the browser. The browser may override errors like this, or there could be JavaScript that modifies the code, for example. Now you've had a taste of creating a web page, and you understand a little more about how web pages display HTML documents versus plain text documents. Of course, a professional web developer doesn't use Notepad or TextEdit to write code. It's possible, but fortunately, we have access to much better tools for development. In the following lesson, we'll take a look at one of these tools, Visual Studio Code.